Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all again. Let's jump in and actually just get started. Apologies.
So we have apologies from councillors Blackwell, Corley and Gray.
Okay, fine, thank you. Minutes, last meeting.
Just need to ask if there's any.
Are there any corrections at all? Is everyone happy with the minutes? No. Thank you.
It's just a few pages.
I'm quite happy to change if you're not happy with it. Okay, members' interests. Does anyone want to declare anything? Are there any members' interests we should be considering? No? Excellent, excellent. We'll be finished quite soon. Okay. Notice of key decisions.
I think on the notice of key decisions, there's no changes to this since the publication of the agenda. So if there's any comments or questions on any of the future items.
No comments? Right, okay, we're racing through. Okay, 4, Market Town Programme. It's the autumn update. Is Councillor Wakefield?
I think just to add on this as well, obviously, I think Councillor Wakefield and Kate will be introducing this item. It's just to remind you that the appendix is a part 2 item. So if you want to discuss anything on that in detail, if you could make the chair aware so that we can move to a private session.
Okay. Did everyone understand that? Yes? Fine, okay.
Thank you. Kate has metamorphosed into Pam, but Kate is around. Thank you. Kate is in front of me, and these are with my new glasses on. Thanks for having us back. This is if I'm talking close enough to the microphone. This is the second quarterly update I've had the pleasure of returning here to speak to since our administration assumed control. And I suppose you'll have read the I think slightly fuller paper than last time. You'll be pleased to know I'm not proposing to go through it in great detail, though Pam may recap some specifics. But I guess just to flag as sort of key new developments, of course, since we last spoke, the master plans for Ramsey, Huntingdon, and St Ives are now live, are now online. The master planning process, probably worth just recapping, is not a sort of set of proposals of what will happen or indeed what we've got money to deliver, because we don't. It's about pulling together proposals on which we seek views so that we have plans that we can then use as a lever to seek funding opportunities as they arise going forward. So as is recapped in the paper as well, we have had developments in the local growth fund bid, so we're hoping for positive news for Ramsey there. What we didn't end up doing, unfortunately, was feeling able to submit a levelling up fund bid in Ramsey, as was touched on in the previous paper. And bluntly, as explained in the document, it was due to the lack of a sufficiently sort of worked up plan for what it was we'd be seeking the money for. So the master plans are a sort of preemptive solution to that problem going forward across those three market towns. So the master plans are in the public domain, but it doesn't mean they're all going to happen as set out. We want views. We've got briefings planned now and dates in the diary with members, and then with town and interested parish councils as well over the coming few weeks. We had invited ward members to tip us off about particular parishes you think might be especially interested in being sort of reminded of invites to the town and parish session. That offer remains open. Please, we are keen to get your local knowledge in suggesting relevant invitees. So do come back to myself or Pam. Paper picks up staffing developments as well that I'd signpost. I mentioned, I think, at the last council meeting that we had 2 new starters that week, if memory serves, on Pam's team. So it's no longer a one-woman show running the Market Towns programme on top of her other responsibilities. And as the paper reports as well, we've got a new senior programme manager role to join and complete the team starting in the next few weeks as well. So I'd sort of issue a warm welcome to the new team to really push us forward on the programme in terms of capacity. And the paper goes into a bit more detail, and then inclusive in part 2, which we'll pick up separately on the finances as well. We've reconfigured the presentation of these to be as transparent as possible about funding sources that we've got and how they link to what, essentially. And we would invite your comments on developments in the programme. I don't know if there's anything more specific you wanted to add, before we open.
I'm quite happy to just open the floor for any questions that people have on the
Any
report.
questions? Any questions? Councillor Pickering.
Hello. So I'm particularly interested in St Neots and the plans for the Priory Quarter. So the report talks about Mott MacDonald being commissioned for a new high-level options analysis. There have obviously been quite a lot of studies and analyses in this area over the years, and I'm just wondering what's new information that you're hoping to turn up from this new analysis that's been commissioned.
Well, I can't speak to the long history of work you might be referring to over the years, obviously, but as part of the Future High Streets Fund, we've got sort of iterative developments looking at each stage of the programme in a bit more detail about options for the Priory Quarter. There's a section in the report that summarises where we're at. Essentially, we've got the sort of high-level feasibility studies that are being progressed, but we're looking to gain a sort of fuller understanding of what the best options might be for developments and what decisions we might need to take in order to enable them, so we can pick up with the same stakeholder groups that I touched on before.
I think my question really is around whether we end up spending more money on the kind of studying the options than we'll end up spending on actually doing anything useful.
You might.
I think the point we would make is that the work that Mott MacDonald's doing, they've been doing for some time. That work is evolving, and to some degree, we sort of put a pause on it whilst we concentrated the team, the minimal staff resource that we'd had on the transport projects, because that was the priority to sort of bring them forward. So we've almost paused some of that work and are sort of looking to
sort of rescope some of that in working with Mott MacDonald. I take on board the point you're making in relation to we don't want to go over what we already know. So what we're looking at is tasking Mott with sort of the art of the possible of the Priory Centre and then the wider quarter. So, there are options available to the Priory Centre building that we need to sort of take on board and engage with local communities, town council, stakeholders and sort of residents about the sort of potential future use of that building. And I think that is one of the sort of main areas of sort of concentration before we open it any wider, because we're all aware of the constraints on the site in relation to flooding and arboricultural issues and things like that. So, to some degree, that work has led us to an informed position, but we need to sort of take some more sort of developed work on, going forward, and be mindful, obviously, of the costs that potentially, given the current market, what is the art of the possible in relation to that building.
So basically, we're not repeating work. We're getting to a granularity that we can then take for meaningful stakeholder input, rather than sort of higher level stuff that's been in the public domain to date.
Thanks, regard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm slightly concerned there, Councillor Wakeford, with regard to your comments there, because it does seem to me that we are repeating work that we've already done in St Neots, because I can remember when I was a town councillor in St Neots, the district council was doing very similar work with regard to the Priory Quarter. So are we not looking at any of that previous historical information? Because surely that is where we should be looking in the first instance, rather than employing consultants and creating an additional cost to this authority. Now, it was going back to 2011, going right up until recently, when I used to be a member on the St Neots Town Centre Initiative. So I am slightly concerned that it does appear to be a repeat. So can you give us assurances that we are not repeating work that we've already done? And what are these additional costs that we're now getting from Mott MacDonald for doing this work?
I hope you'll understand. Clearly, I'm not familiar with the 2011 onwards in original detail, but what I'd say is my clear understanding is we've got a project team in who have obviously inherited the work that's been done previously on all sorts of aspects of the future high streets work, and you're alluding to developments that are before it became the bid that was submitted under that brand, and are making best use of what the council has, but obviously a lot of the details in terms of the investigations, in terms of potential costings and so on, sort of are sort of time dependent as well. So, I mean, if you felt there were specifics that you recall from your experience that you'd like us to double check, I'm sure we can make inquiries to ensure that we've sort of seen and the organisational memory of the council has retained, depending what exactly you're referring to. But that's certainly the assurance I'd give as to our approach, not seeking to repeat work.
I was just going to say that was possibly answered in the previous question, but is it possible that for the next updates, that you could bring back details of the additional costs? Would that be suitable? Can
I do think you need to go back and talk to the town council, because they
Councillor Pickering, do you have any previous knowledge of what happened before that you can add to this, the conversation?
No, I'm fairly new to
Okay,
the council, so it's really just based on knowing as Councillor Gardner says that a lot of work has previously been done in
okay.
that area. I've even I've seen some of the plans through the years, so
Okay, so can we have an update then on the additional costs and what the differences are for your next update? If that's okay.
No, we hear that as an ask.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yes.
I can't see if I'm alive. Yes, I am. If I may, I think the work that Pam is alluding to and Councillor Wakefield in terms of the greater granularity, if I can put my teeth in, is really essentially it's building on the work that's been taken place to date, and essentially it is updating the costs so that we've got an idea of what some of those options have been looked at over MOTS over the last 12 months or so. Actually, how valid are those costings now in the current climate? So the focus is on kind of revisiting those costings, taking into account cost of materials and inflation to see, I think someone said about what's the art of the possible and what can be delivered within the budget. So that's the key focus of the work at the moment. So it's certainly not revisiting and going back. That's quite an important piece of the jigsaw for us. Hopefully that just helps clarify that.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Oh, sorry, Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. I think both my colleagues actually, I had two questions actually, and both my colleagues have just touched on that. And we just had Kate just give us a bit more of an answer. I think I probably would have gone a little bit farther and just sort of said that this St Neots especially was shelf ready; it was there to go. So I'm surprised we are going back. I think when we talk about costs, it'd be interesting to know the difference what we're going to be paying to what the extra cost is there, and what potentially we're going to lose because this was time sensitive funding as well. We're I'm a little bit surprised that we're going backwards. That's how I feel at the moment, and but I won't dwell on that because, like I say, both my colleagues have already asked that anyway now. So my second question was going to be, you won't be surprised about Ramsey. 3.2 about the submission to for a grant from the CPCA. Obviously, we've got in here it sort of says what's happened, but we haven't. It'd be nice to have an update about where that application is. Obviously, I'm very disappointed about the Levelling Up Fund. Sort of, hopefully, we will talk more about that when I know you're coming to Ramsey. So we'll have more of a chat about that. I've got lots of questions about Ramsey. I'm not going to do that tonight because we're going to get our opportunity, obviously, in Ramsey. So I'll leave it there. But an update on 3.2 would be very welcome.
An update would be welcomed by me as well. The timings I think are set out if I'm looking at the right paragraph in here. Maybe it's further up in the document. We have had back and forth engagement with the combined authority over recent months in relation to the bid. Our expectation is that that's going to business board in 3 days, 5 days on the 12th. So how's my maths? 5 days on the 12th of September for consideration. And our expectation of that will be for the full amount that we've requested. And then that'll need sign off by the full combined authority board later this month. So I'm as keen as you for the benefit of Ramsey with this fund, and I hope I can come to you with good news. But clearly we're in combined authority hands. But what I can assure you is officers have done a sterling job in furnishing combined authority officers with as much information as they've needed in order to maximise the strength of that bid in their internal process. Because as the paper flags as well, they have had more meritorious bids than they had money. So sort of meeting the original criteria hasn't quite been enough. So my thanks to officers on that in particular. I look forward to visiting in Ramsey, as you mentioned as well, and discussing this in much more detail. I'm so sorry. I omitted to respond, I think, to the first bit of your comments as well, which I appreciate were linking to previous discussions. But we, to be absolutely clear, a point of our administration starting, there was not a button ready to press to sort of hit go on all of the future high street stuff in St Neots. So I would dispute the characterisation of moving backwards. You know, we've picked up at pace, as we talked about last time as well, and are moving forward as quickly as we can with the staffing resource and the funding that we've inherited, and are making progress as quickly as we can on it.
If I may just come back on that last point.
Please.
So my understanding is that the consultation that has gone on at Ramsey and St Ives and Huntingdon, is that happening again in St Neots then? Or is this purely just an exercise of looking back at funding and budget costs of the projects to see which which can still be done? So I'm guessing we're not doing consultation in St Neots then.
So not on the master plans in St Neots. It's obviously a different funding pot and different process. Our intention, as discussed last time, is to be as open and transparent as possible in the decision making that needs to be made at pace, and we're not reconciling from that at all. So I think the next steps of engagement are different for the different aspects of the St Neots projects as a set out in the paper. Priory Centre engagement will be at a stage, I think, after engagement about outcomes from the Old Falcon surveying, for example. So there's sort of different elements of engagement in relation to the different areas of the St Neots Future High Streets work.
Okay. Any other questions? Actually, Councillor Howell.
Okay. The plans, although they've been published on the website, are not easily accessed. There's a need for more face-to-face consultations with local residents. Has this been factored into the overall communications plan?
So we are intending to get the team and us into all the market towns to discuss. I believe that the paper copies have already reached the town councils. I know they were being sent. Doing my maths on the postal service. So there's the web. There's the website, which has been designed as a primary mode of engagement, but appreciate there are other approaches as well. So we're looking at what we can do within the market towns. I'd say on that, and thank you for reminding me, if members have particular tips about good opportunities to catch their markets, their market towns, whether on market day or whatever else, a good day or time of the week, that it might be worth running a stall in particular, or indeed suggested locations. We're all ears. I think the expectation will be to take a steer from town councils, but members by all means offer us thoughts as well.
Could I just probably just add to that I've had some engagement with the town clerks and actually asked them for alternative venues other than just the town council, so libraries, community centres, neighbourhood trusts for Ramsey, just other places that have got public access, so that we can pick up as many people as possible. And then as Councillor Wakeford has mentioned, when our new programme manager joins in October, there's a feeling of sort of just pushing him out into the market towns, and sort of with support from myself trying to engage. So we are looking at the town councils, ward councillors, providing suggestions as to the best mode of engagement really in the individual towns, because it's not a one size fits all. It's a very much bespoke subject to the market towns.
Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. again, I agree with all the questions and comments made by my colleagues on either side of the table. I'm going to be a bit more direct, Councillor Wakeford, as I don't believe we got a full answer from Councillor Corney's question. A simple yes or no, will there be any more public consultations on the St Neots plan?
We are absolutely planning on more engagement with residents as for labellings and sort of capital C consultations. I mean, well, yes, in a word, but we're trying to make sure it's framed in as useful a way as possible, and as I say, linking into the timescales so that we're not letting that be a cause of delay and not a cause of addition to the cost challenges, which, as we've talked about, are a function of the time that passes with inflation at the moment.
Councillor Harvey.
I mean, if I may, is that a clear enough answer? I don't wish you to feel that I've left you uncertain.
Thank you, Chair. Just got a question that, in light of the current economic environment, funding for all these projects is very likely to be cut or very difficult to obtain. And I'm just concerned that we're going to do all this work and then we can't really deliver anything, and what your plans are for addressing that.
So is the question with respect to the market towns master plans rather than future high streets? Because the two distinct areas. Future high streets work has a lot of money. Yeah. So the master plans are, as you said, there is not money currently sort of in a pot ready to go in the way there is for the future high streets work. But as government bids, as government funding streams become available, which you are, I'm sure, right, there are pressures on availability and therefore on competitiveness by having a clear idea of projects that command local support in market towns. We've got ourselves in the best position to be able to get what money, potentially more limited money, may be available. So that's my general answer to the question, almost precisely because it may be harder to secure bids going forward. It's worth doing, and don't know if there's anything Pam wanted to add. You're hovering.
I suppose the only thing I would add to that is the whole point is that you end up with projects that are at a stage where, if funding opportunities occur, we've got some oven-ready schemes, for want of a better expression, that we can then bring forward and bid for those funding. Obviously, there's we appreciate the environment that we're working in, but I think going forward, I'm sure there will be still some opportunities to lever in some funding for the towns that are now we're consulting out in relation to the master plans. There's a variety of funding sources, from all different types of areas of government, and we just need to see what projects do come out of the back of the feedback received from the master plans, because obviously, as we said at the beginning, that the projects suggested are just that. They're sort of very, very sort of, in principle, there's no sort of, that none of them have got planning permission. There's no, sort of element that they have any sort of planning status. So it's really just to inject that discussion to sort of see what people think are good or bad, so that we can get that dialogue started, so that when we then come out the other side and we do have some projects that maybe do have some potential, then we can then develop them up to a stage where we know what we would need to do to them to get them to the next stage, and therefore be able to sort of lever in funding. And I think one of the elements required for sort of funding is to make sure that we get funding that delivers not only just the capital project, but the revenue elements to bring forward those projects through a feasibility stage to delivery.
Can I just ask a supplementary question on that? With the new leadership just actually coming in and the proposed spending, how confident are we that funding is going to be available moving forward?
Well, if that's a question with respect to external funding sources, we are at the mercy of government in terms of the public funding sources. There may be other ways and other tiers of government with funding available. But I and the new administration and I dare say the old administration either wouldn't claim ownership of a crystal ball to predict national government policy in terms of funding availability. But we are. I would hope that still. The government is committed to levelling up, and levelling up can mean different things. So I hope that there will still be. But the time horizons that some of these projects could be delivered over, I think, are bigger than simply kind of immediate government policy on what bids are available next week, next month.
Councillor Corney.
I'll try again. Thank you for that. Pam, just something you said earlier, you jogged my memory actually when we said neighbourhood trust. No, it's an easy one. The chair actually asked me, it was yesterday, if it'd be possible to get some drawings. I don't know if the other towns would like this as well, but some large scale drawings to put in the library for public to actually come and have a look. So there's a lot of people obviously don't have access, so.
It sounds an excellent idea. I assume we can do that and make it happen. But seriously though, any similar suggestion from colleagues, it doesn't have to be on the spot tonight, about how we can maximise engagement with this, because we want the outcome of this consultation to be as to give us the strongest master plans possible. So we're in the best position to improve our other market towns.
Sorry, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from Councillor Howell's comments earlier, I would just reinforce the point that residents have, in a lot of cases, struggled to access the document on the web for one reason or another. I'm sure you're aware of that. Concerns about the slightly strange URL that has been directed to them is the best one to use. Second point, communications with the town clerk in St Ives have been a bit confusing to the clerk and team, I think, because there was an email which referred to a meeting which is actually an early morning meeting in late September, which, if that's an option, obviously amongst others, that's not so bad. Obviously, early morning is not great for people who are at work. But there was confusion in that email between whether this is a meeting for the town council or whether it was a meeting for ward councillors. And the town clerk has as a result of that, has not taken any action to actually set up a meeting so far. So if that would be clarified to the town, I know a further email is going out, I think, now to the town, so hopefully that will clarify that. But the other point relating to that, bearing in mind the neighbouring villages, which I know is very much in the minds of ward councillors representing villages, is that the onus seems to be on the town clerk to actually reach out to parish councillor clerks to engage them on the market towns. I just feel that's a little bit of a risk, really, because they may not realise, they may not get the idea and understand that they, for example, St Ives are going to reach out to Hemmingford Grey, reach out to Houghton, etc. Whether that will happen as a result of an email to the town clerk, I'm not quite confident about. I think it may be worth having another mechanism for actually getting the villagers' visibility heightened. So those are my points. Thank you, Chair.
Just to pick up on that, I'm quite happy to link up with the St Ives clerk just to clarify exactly what we're anticipating. In relation to the parish councils, I think that the request has been an idea of who to consult with, not necessarily an expectation that they would do that consultation. I see that very much as sort of my role, so I'm very happy to pick that up with that individual and sort of get a plan together of, as you say, which parishes are the most appropriate to consult with.
But for avoidance of doubt, the briefings for town councils are yes, not just for the clerks, are briefings we're offering to the town councils for their members. Timings appreciate are at different points of the day for the different ones, but it's going to be online, and I'm sure it is within our wit to record them to make them available. So thanks for clarifying the need for us to pick up with St Ives on that one.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, on that line, I'm going to follow on for Councillor Wells there, because he's got a very valid point. You do need to be consulting with the clerks of the surrounding villages. Like for Huntingdon, you need to consult with Alconbury, Weston, Ellington, Graffham, and those sort of places. Spaldwick, I could go on and on, but surely you can look at a map just as well as I can, and you can see which villages are drawn to which market town in general. So I would suggest that you send that information to all those clerks, and indeed so that they can then advertise, say, for a meeting whereby, whether it be virtual or in person, I'm not really worried about, but if it was in, where villagers can come along and put their points of view as to what they would like to see in Huntingdon, for example, that would draw them into Huntingdon rather than going to another town or whatever, even out of the district. Because at the end of the day, we've got to make our market towns suitable for our residents. We don't really want them travelling to the likes of Rushton Lakes rather than going to St Neots or Huntingdon. But if we don't consult with them, you're not going to find what those residents are looking for and what they would like to see in Huntingdon, for example. So I do think we need to be a bit more proactive with the rural areas, and I think you can do that by writing to all the clerks of all those rural villages, and then inviting them and to let their residents know within each village when a virtual meeting is likely to take place, and they can then have their input into that particular scheme. Thank you very much, Chair. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Yes, I mean that's all helpful, which is the point of doing this. I think, and we can indeed look at maps. I think we were trying to make sure that we weren't at risk of missing key parishes where there are links particularly strong. Obviously, across the whole of the district, there are links with all the market towns, and among my family, we visit all three on a reasonably regular basis. I'm sure we're not unusual, but we would also be grateful for ward members making any particular suggestions within your areas beyond what might be obvious to us. I suppose is the point of that ask.
Any other questions? Councillor Pickering.
Yes, thank you. Returning to St Neots, if I may, the Old Falcon, I welcome that the council's kind of investigating the options for how to bring that building back into, active use. But I'm just wondering how the work that the council is doing will interact with the planning applications that have been submitted by the owner of the building.
I mean, in short, it won't, but
I think the activities are very separate. Obviously, we are working with the owner. We have established a relationship with the owner, with the current officer working on that project. And we are at the moment looking at an optioneering paper that will come forward to members in due course, which will have all the options sort of considered, that are possible for a decision. In relation to the planning application, obviously we are mindful of that, but that is something that is being dealt with separately by the local planning authority, which obviously we are mindful of, and the feedback coming out of that will, to some degree, potentially inform some of the options being put forward, because obviously we need to understand what the planning constraints, and obviously we do, but it's helpful to have the most up-to-date view of the planning authority in relation to part of that work that we're undertaking. But we aim by, hopefully in the next few months to bring back a paper specifically on the Falcon, which will actually pull out all the issues and all the options that are being considered.
And it's probably worth stressing, we absolutely recognise the strength of feeling and the prominent strength of feeling about the Old Falcon, its prominence, obviously in St Neots Market Square, and how massive an issue this is for your residents.
Any other questions? Can we move on to the next item? Okay, right. The next item is corporate performance report.
I think you've got us all over again in private first.
Sorry. Yeah.
Not if colleagues didn't have questions on it.
Good evening, everyone. In a moment, Karen will bring the report forward, but as a very short means of introduction, I'd just like to update panel that while I was away on holiday, Karen, who is only in her third month, has been getting her feet under the table, working out which way is up, and in doing so has been making excellent early progress. So I'd just like to leave you with that reassurance.
Thank you. That's very kind. So we're presenting the Q1 financial update and inviting your comments on that, please. The Q1 financial update is taking the actual activity across the council up to the end of June, and then adding our forecast on for the rest of the financial year. It's worthwhile mentioning this is the first update to the published budget, the calculation of which started pretty much this time last year, and before many of the current uncertainties were known. COVID was known and anticipated, but not the war in Ukraine and the subsequent impacts that's going to have on our energy prices and the supply chain. We mentioned in the Market Towns programme that prices are going up, and that's true across many of our activities. So we have adjusted in our forecast for known factors, such as the final changes to the minimum living wage, which has significant impacts upon the One Leisure units, which employ fitness instructors pretty much at the lower end of the pay scale, and the suspension of the pre-out service in development planning, which has reduced their forecast income. But we've also recognised any savings to date attributable either to vacancy savings or changes to our operational delivery. So it's kind of it is our best estimate of where we think we're going to come out for the year end. What we haven't adjusted for is the impact of increases in energy prices. Our gas prices are locked in for the rest of this year, so we have little risk on that. But our electricity prices fall out of contract in October. We have secured new supply contracts for these, but these were done after this report was generated, so that is not built in, and we will be presenting the impact of those in the Q2 forecast. So coming back to this report, we're currently showing or forecasting an overspend of 275,000, and that puts us within touching distance of the budget we set last year. And given all the uncertainties I just described, actually I do feel that puts us in a good position. However, no, we do still have uncertainties across the rest of the year, and we are still planning to mitigate those when we can. But there is some risk to the forecast, and I can't hand on heart say we're only going to come out with a £275,000 overspend. If I move on to our capital, we have a capital budget this year of almost 40 million. Most of that rolled forward from previous years. 30 million of that is already allocated to projects in the year, with the balance being carried forward to next year. As part of the MTFP process that we've now started for next year, I will be reviewing all those capital budgets and the sums rolled forward to make sure that they do actually relate to live projects and reflect what the administration is planning on delivering. Our commercial investment strategy continues to provide good returns. This is returns which go into our revenue budget and help support that. There is more uncertainty in the market at the moment, with some of the smaller businesses struggling with inflationary price rises. Break clauses have been invoked on both of our Fareham properties, and the estates team has been down to Fareham to meet with agents down there, and they are currently evaluating a number of options on what to do with those buildings. That's mainly my comments on the report.
Are there any questions on the report? Oh, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me with regard to the
I'd suggest that's probably out of scope of our questioning for this evening. I think it has a wider operational and planning for next year impact. So I can't give you a sensible answer. Happy to take it away, however, and come back with that. So we could take a minute.
Sorry. Okay.
If I'm on. In terms of restarting the pre-app service, we're looking at streamlining the process, making it a smoother process, making sure that staff, we've had quite a lot of staff turnover in the development management team, so making sure that all staff are trained on that particular service. But we are hoping to resume that within the next kind of month or so, month to 2 months. So we're actively looking at that implementation. But what I don't want to do is to restart and then we have to pause it. So we need to make sure that we are good to go. We've got the plans, everyone's ready to go, and then we'll be communicating that. So there is work happening on that at pace, but very aware of the financial figures that you've highlighted in the report.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. I'm wondering, in respect of council tax, whether in the coming months and year, whether we're anticipating a significant drop in council tax payments or an increase in the number of defaults, and also whether, as a result of increased council tax support, whether that will impact, our kind of projected income.
We've got all sorts of modelling going forward. I think there's one of the questions was asked prior on the prior point was around central government. I think realistically we are, in Harry Millen's words, at the behest of events, dear boy, and we are really just going to have to wait to see what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks. See what central government are revising in terms of how they're putting forward the financing and what's going to be offered in terms of support. And at that point, we can then hope to model what might come to us next year based on what domestic energy bills will look like for the majority of households.
Are there any other questions? Yeah. No? Can we move on to the next item? and that's corporate performance report. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to be able to present to you the Q1 Corporate Performance Report covering the period April the 1st to June 30th. I think once again the performance report here is overwhelmingly positive. Many of the green indicators hide the fact that performance targets were not only met, but in many cases exceeded. So I'd like to congratulate officers and all the hard work that's gone into delivering these excellent results. With regard to key indicators, all but one is green. And I'd like to draw your attention, as well as considering some of the below par performance, perhaps, some of the exceptional performance we've seen, especially as it relates to helping our residents as they face up to the growing cost of living crisis. So I'd like to point out KA 13 and 14, in which we're conducting a comprehensive review of the customer portal to make it easier to access our services. KA 15, in which 56K's worth of discretionary housing payments have been awarded to residents on the lowest incomes. KA 16 and 21, which is a review of the voluntary and community sector support provision and strategy, especially with regard to people at the highest risk of crisis, which will be important. And outside the cost of living crisis, also K25, we supported 200 Ukrainian guests under the Home for Ukraine scheme. The only amber indicator in the key indicators is to do with the formation of the Integrated Care Partnership, which is a complicated process. I know that Councillor Pitt has been in London today discussing that, and I think that process is slightly outside of our control because those community engagements have not been started yet. With regard to corporate indicators, the performance is slightly less impressive, but still very positive, with 59% of the indicators in green, 41% amber, and 0 red. I'd like to draw your attention to PL 16. 400 residents in risk of crisis were supported by the Residents Advice Team, with over £7,000 accessed from the Household Support Fund. And PL 26, Ramsey Neighbourhood Trust and Caresco being the first two community groups awarded the Good to Go accreditation, which will also be important in the cost of living crisis. I'm reassured that many of the amber indicators were near misses and that others were influenced by seasonal variation in demand that will be recovered later in this year. So of the 9 ambers, I think 5 are predicted to recover before the end of the year and only 4 are predicted to remain amber. Those 4 are PL 15, which is one leisure admissions, which is expected to be 2% down on target, PL 22 and 23, which is continuing problems with planning applications, dealing with a backlog and to do with recruiting officers, and PL 27, which is food safety inspections, which is still under the control of the Food Standards Agency as part of the COVID recovery programme. Finally, I'd like to talk about corporate project status. Once again, the majority of projects are on track with 6 green statuses, 4 projects on amber, all of which are likely to recover. The single red indicator is to do with the implementation of e-billing, which has been delayed because officers were busy working on the energy rebate scheme, which I think you will agree is a wise decision and reflects all of our desires to support our most vulnerable residents. Dan?
Thank you. I think the only thing I'd like to add is just to help manage expectations for the future is the recycling rate. We've reported in here at 60% forecast for the year end. I think being a few months further on in Q2, with the summer we've had, the green waste collection will have had a fall in compared to previous years, and so the likelihood of achieving 60% by the year end is lower than it was when we predicted at the end of Q1. We should see an updated forecast in the next report.
Are there any questions on the paper? Councillor Howell.
You mentioned the good to go status for Hunts Forum. Just wanted some clarification on to what benefit it actually gives the groups. I know it gives HDC, sort of shows the accreditation that they've got everything that HDC wants, but what does it benefit the groups? Because they obviously, it's not going to mean anything to the National Lottery or any other funders or things like that. So
I'm afraid that's a bit outside of my area of expertise, but we can find the answer and get back to you.
think I'd probably add it as it says, it's good to go. I think it's going to be useful. I think the county council would take that accreditation into account in their funding opportunities, and certainly Huntingdonshire District Council will do. So it's where we have funding that we want to see, but through voluntary and community organisations to deliver to local communities, those groups will be already assessed and ready to go.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just off, we are struggling to hear up this end, so if you could move the microphone a bit closer, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Looking through, and obviously it looks all good. I'm surprised that some of the things that was on the last performance report of Q4 are now no longer on there, especially some of the red indicators of things that the council could improve on. But I also looked through some of the targets. To me, they look quite low, shall I say. So, picking out PI2, the target is 80%. Last year we achieved 96%, and Q1 this year we achieved 97%. So an 80% target, is that high enough? Should we not be pushing ourselves and our officers and our residents to do slightly better than what we're targeting? And looking through, there's a couple of other PIs that probably could have a slightly higher target just to try and challenge us to get the best that we can.
So I'd completely agree that perhaps the most negative part of this report is perhaps there's too much green, and I think that for targets to be meaningful, they have to be challenging. I would point out that none of these targets were set by this administration. We inherited them from the previous administration, and as we go through the proper corporate planning process, we will be setting new targets. And I completely agree with you that they need to be challenging targets, because I think we quite often we learn as much from failure as we do from easy success. So yeah, I agree completely. I think it's something we have to work together to achieve.
Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. It's great to see such a positive report. I'm just wondering which areas of performance you see being at the greatest risk as we go deeper into the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, well, I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm optimistic that the change of leadership in Westminster will perhaps have a positive impact, at least with regard to energy bills. But it's difficult not to look at some of these performance indicators and see that they're basically at the behest of national economics. So, for example, PL4, which is net change in local number of businesses, with energy costs going through the ceiling. I know certain St Neots businesses have already complained to me about their £2,000 energy bills turn into £12,000 energy bills. So I think, unless things change quickly, we're going to see businesses going to the wall. And so that will be heading in the wrong direction. Footfall in town centres, PL5, that's probably going to decrease as well as people have less money to spend. Employment rate is also, I hope it's going to stay high, but we have little control over that. Our services, so housing benefit and council tax support, they're going to have much more demands on those services. And PL16, which is the aim is to minimise the number of residents at risk of crisis. Well, that's a laudable aim, but I think the number of residents, on the verge of crisis is going to be increasing greatly unless something changes. So, and PL20 as well, number of homelessness preventions with people not able to afford their energy bills. I think there's a real risk, and I think officers are aware of a real risk to all of our services. So I think there's lots of these things that could go in the wrong direction. And my personal opinion is this, what we're facing now is possibly as serious as coronavirus pandemic. So hopefully it won't be, and hopefully we recover, but there's lots of potential for negative in the future. But I think that's what district council is there for, is to help our residents at times of crisis. So hopefully we can minimise the impact of those things.
I agree, actually, all of that. Are there any more questions? Any more questions? No? Well, okay, so we can move on to the final item, overview and scrutiny work programme.
So just running through the items on the work programme at the moment. The first project, which is collated to this group is the review of external appointments to outside organisations. That group met earlier this week. It was a very successful meeting. I think we've established a way to progress that project forward with hopefully some engagement from officers and councillors and also some of the local drainage boards to help progress that further. The idea being that that is going to be a paper that comes back to this panel hopefully early in the new year. So that will be progressed, but obviously we will provide a further update at the next meeting of that once we've had a couple of meetings going forward. So hopefully that will be, but if there is any questions on that to come through, but if you are involved on a drainage board or an external organisation, you should have had a questionnaire come to you over the summer, which was to help gather some information to help that group sort of form some ideas and move that forward, which is happening. And then the other item is the climate change strategy. That again is moving forward, and a meeting is being set up for that group to meet with the appropriate officers to help establish a bit of a way forward, and with the new administration and the new direction and recent events, shall we say, to help move that forward. So that's where that one is. Just to add on to that, as obviously you're all aware, there was scheduled to be an away day next week, which has been cancelled due to lack of people being available to attend, essentially. So we will be sending a questionnaire out to gauge some perhaps more convenient dates and times for everybody to attend, and the major part of that away day was to help schedule some future projects for the work programme. So that obviously will be coming at you in the next couple of days to try and get some probably more convenient times and dates to come through. So if there was any questions on either of those groups, happy to help on that one.
No questions? Yes. So no further questions. Well, that just brings the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your time, effort, and very